I am the worst when it comes to remembering names. Like, I could like rant and rave about a book and a series for like until my face is blue, and then people will be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, what's the name of the main character? And I could have no memory. I could be like, you got me there. I don't remember the name of the main character, but I do remember how they made me feel, and it was fantastic.
Didn't I make you laugh? Didn't I make you smile?
Hi friends, it's Rory, and today it is officially March, and we are here to talk about the books that I read in February. And there's 11 of them, so we're gonna have to work very, very fast. So as always, for my wrap-ups, I'm gonna start from the book that's from like the oldest books I read this month to the newest books I read this month. So let's get started. So first book I read this month, I actually read it in the middle of freaking Barnes and Nobles, because I had an hour to wait before I went to pick up my niece from work. And that book is Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky by Mackenzie Lee. It's a little like novella thing. And it is literally fantastic. So it's just a little side story. Let me say little one more time. It's a side story about Monty and Percy trying to get it on, and how much of a disaster that happens. And I was not expecting a lot from this book, and it blew away my expectations. And I gave it 5 stars. Listen, Monty is my baby. He's my beautiful disaster by baby, and that could be part of it. But the other part is, when you kind of like go into a book expecting it to just be fluff, and then you get hardcore character, you're a little bit shook. Like, this was literally just like, oh, I'm going in expecting them to be like, you know, cute and, you know, in love, and it'll be awesome. And then I went in and it was like Monty being like, I don't deserve Percy. Percy deserves better than me. I'm nothing but a whore. And I'm just like, it was a lot of character in 100 pages. And also I feel very closely connected to Monty, because a big part of this was talking about like how he's still not over how he feels like a disappointment to his father, but at the same time he doesn't want to even think about his father, and that as a result makes him feel unworthy of Percy, who he sees as perfect. And I was like, damn, son. Second book, I actually read it on the same day. I waited. My niece works at Panera Bread, and I literally read this in Panera Bread while I enjoyed a Panera cookie, which are the best cookies, don't at me. And that is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. And I also gave this book 5 stars. Listen, this graphic novel, it's a graphic novel. First of all, it's gorgeous. Look at that. It's beautiful. Now, this is the second Tilly Walden graphic novel that I've read. I read Spinning, actually, I believe last month, or maybe the month before that, I'm not sure. But I gave that one a 3 stars, and it was actually on the lower end of 3 stars. I wasn't sure how I felt about this, but this was 5 stars through and through. I just, it's so good. This may be my favorite graphic novel I've ever read. So this follows 2 different storyline, or like 2 different time periods for the main character, who's named Maya, and she, one storyline is she is in boarding school, and it is talking about her love story with her girlfriend. And then the other one is a couple years down the road, where she is the newest crew member on a kind of like, what's the right word to describe it? Like, she's a crew for a group of people that they go to like historical places and they refurbish them. At the same time, she's never really gotten over her girlfriend, who she never got to say goodbye to, and so she wants to kind of like go and find her and, you know, have her proper goodbye. And I love every single character in this book, but especially there's a non-binary character in here named Elliot, who is I'm in love with. I'm in love with Elliot. They are They are so great, and I love them so much, and fantastic. And this is also like a light sci-fi. Like, it's definitely sci-fi, but it doesn't go too in depth. The most that you need to be concerned about is that there's this place called the Staircase, if I remember correctly, and it's run by this family, and it's kind of like a big political thing where there's a whole bunch of like resources and things there, and people want to take control of it, but that family refuses to. And so the entire place is kind of like a no man's land. Like, the people who are born there cannot leave, and then no one can go in there. This is a delightful graphic novel. I'm not going to tell more about it because it's so good, and once again, I gave it 5 stars. Up next, I was really big on graphic novels in the beginning of this month, let me tell you. So I read The Hidden Witch by Molly Ostertag, which is the second in the series of The Witch Boy. I gave that one 4 stars. I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Witch Boy, which I gave 5 stars. This one, it's after, you know, Asher has been allowed to, you know, become a witch, but the main part of it has to do with a new girl that is at his best friend's school, and she is a witch, but she doesn't know that she's a witch, and so she's slowly, you know, becoming a dark witch like his great uncle. Maybe it's just that I love Asher the most, and he seemed to not be as prominent of a character in this. That is what my issue with. It's like, it's still great, and I really did enjoy it, hence why I gave it 4 stars, but it just I didn't connect to it as much as I did with The Witch Boy. Up next, I randomly decided one day to try to read one of my Audible originals that you get for free. You know, when you have an Audible account, you get like 2 Audible originals for free. So I decided to read one, and the one that I got this month was called Alone with the Stars by David R. Gillam. The issue that I have with the Audible originals is that they feel kind of like unimportant. Most of them are under 5 hours. And so they're very short stories, which is not bad in and of itself, because I do enjoy a lot of like really good short stories, but it feels like they are just, you know, narrating these books that no one cares about and then giving them away for free. This one was okay. I say okay because I really enjoyed half of the story, and I didn't so much enjoy the other half of the story. So Alone with the Stars is about the Amelia Earhart disappearance, which, if you don't know, Amelia Earhart is, she was a pilot, and she was the first woman to try to circumnavigate the globe, but towards the end of her journey, her plane went missing, and no one has ever been able to figure out what happened to it. And there are a lot of theories, and right now the most likely theory is that her plane crashed into an island, and then they were never able to, you know, find that plane. There's a lot of evidence for that, specifically, and there's a story about a girl who claims to have gotten been able to hear a radio SOS from Amelia Earhart after her disappearance. And so that's what this is about. This is a kind of like a fictional story based on that. Half of the story is about Amelia Earhart and the process of them disappearing. And that's the part I didn't like so much. Like, I felt like it wasn't as important as the other side. The other side is about a girl in Tampa, Florida, whose father is a big lover of like radios, and so he has like a radio tower that can hear like halfway around the world. And so she hears the SOS call from Amelia Earhart, and she goes to her father, And her father is like, you know, I believe you. Let's see what we can do about it. And they go to a military base. She tries to explain what she heard, and one of the people, the commanding officer, doesn't believe her. For really stupid reasons. Basically, he doesn't believe her because she's a woman. And also because her mother married her father instead of him. And so he's jealous about that. And then it quick jumps to like 50 years later when they have, you know, more evidence suggesting that Amelia Earhart did end up crashing on an island and that maybe they could have found her, and kind of reflects back on how she had to use that experience to kind of push herself. And that side of the story was much more interesting than the Amelia Earhart stuff. I kind of wish that it was all that. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I still don't really like Audible originals, but I'm gonna probably keep listening to them because I get them for free and I might as well. Up next, we have another graphic novel, and that is Kiss Number 8 by Colleen Venable. Here's the thing about this one, is that, first of all, the art is pretty good. Despite it being a fairly lengthy, like nowhere near On a Sunbeam, but it's a pretty decently sized graphic novel. This tried to tell so many stories. Like, it had so many plot points, and as a result, they ended up all kind of feeling underwhelming. So the basic plot of this is that the main girl, Mads, which is this one, has had 7 kisses before, or 6 kisses, and she's trying to avoid kissing her friend's younger brother. Or her father gets a letter that she ends up taking from a mysterious person, giving her like $50,000 or like $100,000, some large number like that, and basically saying that it's from her grandfather. She calls both of her grandfathers, and it is discovered that it is her father's mother who was a transgender man and cut out of all of their lives. And he went on to go and live long-term with his girlfriend, who is a waitress and was a lawyer and was a like civil rights activist for transgender people. Along with that, there is a kind of like aspect of her questioning her sexuality, and she is not straight. I'm just gonna let this out. Along with, and there's, oh my gosh, there's so many storylines in this. There's also about her dad's relationship with her trans grandfather, like religious connection to her sexuality because she's Catholic, and there's also her having a crush on her best friend. And once again, there's her not wanting to kiss one of her friend's younger brothers who has a crush on her. There are so many freaking storylines. And that's the main issue I had with this, is that while I was reading it, sure, I was enjoying it, but when I went back on it, I realized that there was not enough development. And so I ended up giving it a 2 stars, and I'm really, really sad about that because I think this could have been a really, really good graphic novel. I think that if they had just like cut down on the storylines they were trying to say, and, you know, maybe only done the trans grandfather and her questioning her sexuality, that could have been better. In the long run, yes, I enjoyed this while I was reading it, but afterwards, I could only give it a 2 stars. Up next, I listened to the audiobook of Sadie. And yes, I know I am so far behind on the Sadie love. Whenever I used to watch videos on people recommending audiobooks, they would always be like, oh my gosh, you need to listen to Sadie. It's so great. And yes, Sadie was really, really good. But in the long run, I think it was actually the audiobook that made me give it 4 stars instead of 5 stars. Now, if you were like me and you don't know what Sadie is about, Sadie is the story. It's kind of written in two it's really interesting the way it's written, and I will give it that. It is 100% interesting. So there's 2 points of view. The one point of view is from Sadie herself, and the other point of view is from a radio show about Sadie. Now, the main storyline is that Sadie's younger sister, Maddie, is murdered. And then a couple months later, Sadie goes missing. And that is what the radio show is about. It's about Sadie's going missing, and they're following her track to try to find where she is. And it's presented in a radio show. And then the other point of view is from Sadie herself as she, goes through that journey. So you find out things from Sadie's side that are brought up later on in the radio station, in the radio thing, but the radio doesn't know what's going on, whereas you do because you've read Sadie's point of view. Things like that. It's so good. It's really, really good. But once again, like I said, I think it was the audiobook that ended up making me rate it lower. Because there were some parts, and the audiobook was really, really clever. It was like fully cast, so there was obviously Sadie's character, and then everyone else had, their own person narrating for them. So the radio show host had a person, her like adopted grandmother had their own person, their mother had their own person, all these small characters had their own people, but a lot of times the voice kind of didn't match up with them. So like the ones that were really good, there was the voice of their mother was really good. The radio host was fantastic, loved him. His voice was like ASMR to me. Their grandmother was really, really good. There was a waitress that was really, really good. But then there were some things like for example, there was a truck driver who used to date Sadie's mom. And his voice, he's supposed to be like a truck driver that, has gone through some shit. He's old and weathered and things like that. And he sounded like a teenager. And it didn't match, and that kind of like took me out of it. So in this situation, I know for a fact that that's the reason I rated it less. But at the same time, I like the audiobook because it wouldn't have felt as genuine reading it, I feel, because it was so exciting to have the different voices because it was the radio show. Yeah, it's a lose-lose situation. Like, I ended up rating it lower because of the audiobook, but I also feel like I could have only read this book on audiobook because of... I feel that way about Radio Silence too, which is the reason I haven't read it yet. Like, I feel like I need to listen to the audiobook for Radio Silence. Same as for The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hughes. Is that the name of it? The one that everyone on BookTube wants to read. Everyone says listen to the audiobook, and I feel like I'm gonna have to listen to the audiobook. But at the same time, is that gonna make me rate it less? Who knows? Anyways, Sadie, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed Sadie's character. And I was feeling things real hardcore for her. I felt, she was so tragic, and I felt it deep in her soul. And so I recommend it, but do know that there are heavy, heavy themes in Sadie's. Anyways, up next, this book was blowing my fucking mind. So, next I listened to the audiobook like I have for the other 2 books of The Hand on the Wall, which is the 3rd Truly Devious book, and it was fantastic. For most of that book, that was a 5-star book. Until the ending. Not to say that the ending was disappointing, just that the ending was lackluster in my opinion, or at least part of the ending. Like, the ending was real good, but part of the explanation of the ending was not great, and that kind of made it down. Really, this is a 4.5 book, but I do think that I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the second book, which is great. So, if you don't know, this is the third book, so I'm not going to say anything about what happens in this book. So, if you don't know, Truly Devious is the story of a girl named Stevie who is chosen to go to a boarding school called Ellingham Academy. Now, at Ellingham Academy, you are kind of able to, like, decide what you want to study yourself. Stevie wants to become a detective when she's older, but specifically, she wants to solve the Ellingham disappearance. Or the Ellingham mystery, which is where the creator of Ellingham Academy, who was a very wealthy person, his wife and daughter were kidnapped from the school. His wife ended up being found dead later on, but no one was ever able to find the daughter. And so she wants to be the person who solves the Ellingham mystery. And it's so good. This one is so good. So I will let you guys know, within the first 5 minutes of me listening to this audiobook, I out loud gasped so loud and went, "Oh my god, you are joking me!" There were twists, there were turns. Unlike the second one, I did not figure out the like who did everything. But I did figure out kind of like the ending in a roundabout way where I was like, I think this is what's gonna happen, and then it ended up happening. But not the way I expected it. So it was kind of predictable, but not at the same time. You feel me? You feel me. Anyways, and it was so good. It was so good. That's all I can say. Truly Devious kind of became one of my favorite series in this past year because I literally read all 3 books in the past year. But they're so good. Anyways, 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was great. Loved it. Next, I read Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And Elizabeth Acevedo is gonna become one of my favorite authors. I don't make the rules. I also gave it 5 stars, just like I gave With the Fire on High 5 stars. And if I give Clap When You Land 5 stars, she's gonna be my favorite author, because I've never once given an author all 5 stars for every book that I've ever read of them. But The Poet X is about a girl who is a poet, and the entire book is written in verse, and so I listened to it on audiobook because that's, if I'm going to read something in verse, I'm going to listen to it so I can hear the verse. This book made me cry, my dudes. This book made me cry, full-on fledged tears. There's a lot of like talk about mother-daughter relationships, and like especially mothers who are mothers that don't want to be, and the brother in this was fantastic as well. This book is good. It's a lot about like growing up, specifically growing up as a girl, and growing up as a girl in a world in which girls are kind of like treated to a bigger standard. And it's good. 5 stars. Up next. Oh no, the next one is the one I don't want to talk about because I'm gonna feel bad. This next one, let me tell you, I've gone back and forth so much on this book because I feel like I'm walking on a very straight line with my review of this book. And so to start off, I want to admit that this book is not written for me. Like, this is a book in which you know that it is not written for you. And this book is not written for me, Miss White 26-year-old. So the book is Slay by Brittany Morris. And I hated this book for the majority of the time. Oh, Once again, this book is not written for me. This book is very much written for, like, someone else. But I gave it 2 stars. And here's the reason why. So, the main kind of, the basic plot of this is that the main character, Kira, is a developer and creator of a online game called Slay, which is kind of like a card-based dueling game. And it's also like virtual reality because this is like sci-fi realism. And she develops this, and she only has one other moderator who helps her, and no one in her family knows that she develops this. And there is a real-life murder that happens as a result of the game, and her game is for Black people only. It's kind of, and her game specifically has to do with a whole bunch of kind of Black-based cultures. I'm trying to remember the cards. There's like one called, for Michael Jordan, there's a Jays card. There's a specifically one that did make me laugh a lot was there's a Your Aunt's Potato Salad card. And there's that, but the point of it is that there is a murder outside of the game that is a result from the game, and because this is a game in which it's specifically kind of supposed to only be for Black people, that she, when the media catches wind of it, they start to kind of see this game as racist and discriminatory. I could not have said that word worse. Along with that, her boyfriend, Kira's boyfriend, is someone who sees video games as specifically created by white people in order to bring Black people, specifically Black men, down. Now, when you say that plot, that sounds so fantastic. And okay, we're just gonna go into why I didn't like it. So the main reason why I didn't like it is because it was so unrealistic. Now, understandably, because it is a sci-fi reality like book, I know that there are going to be like leaps of faith that I have to take. Like I have to suspend my disbelief. But there was so much suspension of disbelief that it just became unbelievable. This game, in which is very, very much populated and is very, very, like, the way it was described was very active and involved, and the fact that it is an AR game means that it needs more people. You cannot tell me that only one girl and one moderator are going to be able to freaking do this entire thing. That was one of my biggest complaints, was that it was so unrealistic. And furthermore, that she would be able to do it and have no one in her life know that she was the person doing it. Like, I feel a lot of this book could have been better for me on the realistic side if, like, there was a team of 10 people. That would be enough people that I could be like, okay, understandable. That is enough people that I can see being able to control and like keep track and maintain and create this game. But just you and one other moderator, no ma'am. Furthermore, games like this cost money. And I'm just gonna use League of Legends as an example. The amount of storage space, of server space, of maintenance, of like all that jazz that are required are gonna cost money. But she only ever describes putting in extra money that she gets. Like, she doesn't have a job besides this game, besides tutoring for $60 for math with her friend every once in a while. No? Like, there was even a part where she was talking about how they were going to need lawyers, and she was worried she wasn't going to have the money in order to get lawyers. You need money to make games, and it's just like, it was too much. It was too much of a leap of faith. But the real thing that really made me dislike this game was her boyfriend, Malcolm. He was the worst. Oh my gosh, he was the worst. There were literally parts of that where I was out loud saying, "You have got to be fucking kidding me." And it's, so he was awful. He was an awful person. Like I said before, I am not the person who should be complaining about this book online. Basically, he's the type of person who's misogynistic and an asshole, and there's literally a part that made me laugh out loud because she was just like, Kira was just like, oh, Malcolm is not a conspiracy theorist, but once again, a big part of his character is that he believes that video games were created by white people, specifically to keep black men down. And I'm just like, he's not a conspiracy theorist. Are you serious? Now, do not get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. I know that a lot of things were created by white people to keep people of color down. I know that. But some of the things that he was choosing were just like a bit ridiculous. And I know for a fact that Malcolm is a big reason why I didn't like this book, because there's a significant chunk of the middle of the book in which he is not there, and I enjoyed that part so much more. Like, where it was just the video game, and it was Kira, and it was her moderator especially was one of my favorite characters. And it was fantastic. Another big part of this game, or of this story, was that towards the end, there is a character who goes in and starts to act basically like a white supremacist, and they end up having a duel between Kira's character and his character, in which they are going to try to, the winner gets to have the game, basically. And the person who that was is, oh my gosh. Another thing that I had an issue with is that I feel like the actual plot took way too long to get to. Like, the actual, the part that I care about is kind of like what happens after this real life murder. But it felt like so long to get to that part. Once I was there, it was okay. To get to that part, it was just a lot of me kind of stamping down the unrealisticness and also my hatred of Malcolm. Okay, that's all I'm gonna talk about that one, because I genuinely feel bad. But yeah, 2 stars. I'm sorry. Up next, I reread Peter Pan. Peter Pan is one of my favorite books. Specifically one of my favorite classics. I have a Peter Pan tattoo. It says "to live would be an awfully big adventure," and so I decided to reread it after a book that I didn't like, because I know for a fact that I like Peter Pan, and I didn't read it because I never read classics that I have read before. Anyways, last thing that I read was the first edition of the Bombshells comic book. Gave this 3 stars. It is a kind of like an alternate history in which it's a female-led version of the DC comic books, in which kind of like the main female heroes and villains are reset into the 40s, and there is a organization called the Bombshells where they try to find these super people, or super women, in order to fight against kind of like the Nazis and all that jazz. I picked this up, honestly, because I am currently in a TikTok story tag which is superhero based, and I wanted to read comics. And I've had this, I actually own the first 3 editions of this. This is the gayest comic I've ever read. There are lesbians up the wazoo in this. Oh my gosh, like Batwoman is a lesbian, and this one specifically has a relationship between Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and that is one of my favorite DC ships of all time. But overall this was a first edition, so it was a lot of like setting up the characters and getting them into the bombshells. So I have a feeling I'm gonna like the next one so much more because they're all finally there and I don't have to hear about how they get there, which is a lot of what this was. So I gave this 3 stars. And so that was the last book that I read, but I did have a DNF this month, which was Unapologetic, a Black Queer Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements by Charlene A. Caruthers. I DNF'd this, but I did not DNF it because I didn't enjoy it. This is definitely a situation where I am not in the mood to read this book. Like, because while I was reading it, I was enjoying myself, but at the same time, it felt like I wanted to put the book down every time I read it. So I got about 46 pages, which is a little less than halfway, and I just knew that if I kept reading it, it would end up getting a lower rating than it really deserved, and so I decided to DNF it for right now, and hopefully I'll come back to it when I'm in a more like ready to read this mood. You feel me? You feel me. That's the end of this wrap up. For March, I am going to only be reading middle grade books. I actually have to go pick up some books on my way to visit my mother tomorrow. And so yeah, expect for next month's wrap up to be a whole lot of middle grades. I'm really excited. I'm actually going to start reading the only Rick Riordan series that I have not read, which is the Kane Chronicles. And I have a bunch of middle grade books that I've been wanting to read for a long time that I have planning to pick up. There's also going to be a throwback review from a book that I read in, specifically in middle school. And yeah, so this month is gonna have a whole bunch of cool stuff. In the meantime, I hope that you guys had a great time with me today. As always, there's a link down below to where you can register to vote, let your voice be heard, join your democracy. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye!